All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Lifting, Running, and Living with your favorite coaches, Kelly.
Hello.
Hey, and JK. Tis me. All right. We are going to warn you ahead of time. We are recording many hours later than our usual recording time and a day
Yeah.
later than our usual recording time. So we have already talked about how this is like late night podcasting for us. And to be clear, we're talking about 7 p.m. Central and
Yeah.
6
6 p.m. for
p.m. your
me.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
being late. So welcome to the exciting nightlife that we have here. Yeah, it's like LRL after dark going on here.
Yeah, except not after dark yet. As
I was trying
anyone
to
watching can
spice.
see, that's a bright
Yeah,
ray of sunshine
yeah.
threatening to
Well,
blind me.
I'm in my basement, so there is a window-ish type
Yeah.
thing.
You
But
you look the
anyways,
same as every episode.
I'm gonna take that as a compliment that I
Your
consistently
environment looks the
show
same.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Fantastic. Did uh did you see that post that I put on Threads about the person who was like, "Hey, you look a lot older on video than you do in person."
I think I did,
Yeah,
but
I
or
was like,
maybe
"Oh,
did you
well,
post on
thank you."
Instagram too? Because
I
with
don't
my
think
new
so.
ClearSpace app, I
Yeah.
haven't been going on Threads anymore.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It's
No, I
like
think
not worth one of my my slots for social media for
that's
the day.
fair. That's fair. You know what? I co-sign that. I do not
Yeah,
think that was worthy of that. No, I usually handle threads like thoughts. So I've
yeah,
just renamed it thoughts in my head.
that's
Just
pretty
random
much what it
thoughts.
is.
Yeah. Anyways, all
Yeah.
right. Well, let's kick things off here per the usual with updates. So why don't you get us started? What's going on with you these days?
Well, first, would you like to? I'm wearing one of your shirts. Anyone watching
Yes.
can see.
Yes.
Do
Thank
you
you.
want to remind the people where they can get your shirts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how I'm not wearing a Feed Your Habits shirt, which I typically do. So, if you would like to get the design that Kelly is wearing, along with many other designs that we have available, just log on feedyourhabits.com. If you hop on Instagram, the link to the website is there also. And there's a code for 10% off. Just JK, that's my name, JKFYH. The FYH is for Feed Your Habits. So JKFYH. You just type that in at checkout and that'll get you 10% off. And we also do not charge for shipping. Very transparently, we wrap up the price for shipping in the price of the item. There's no magic there. So we do our best to try and create some quality stuff. So you've got the tee. I know Ty has the tank.
Yep.
And to quote him, he said it's a banger. So we're taking
Yeah,
that. We're taking that as a positive. So yeah,
definitely is.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
So
it is
anyways,
very comfy. It's my lifting shirt, and I just came from lifting because, like you said, we're recording late. It's been a jam-packed day for both of us, which
yeah,
leads me into my first update, which
yeah,
is just an update on my new job. I'm in
yeah.
week 2 now. Last week 1 was very overwhelming. I had a few moments where I freaked out a bit because I was like, how am I going to do everything with this new job? Like everything outside of the job.
Oh yeah.
Because, like I knew going in the first, couple weeks to a month are going to be some of the worst. Just learning everything, figuring out where things are, who knows what, and just kind of getting up to speed. And it's just like heavy brain loads to start. And then thinking about that being the constant with like coaching, podcasting, group runs, social obligations, trying to see friends, sleeping.
Uh huh.
I had a freak out moment, but this week is much better because I feel like I have my footing a bit at work. I just don't know a lot, but I've learned enough to contribute some things, which is very exciting.
Well, that's good. That's
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah, and I really like my team, like my immediate team, the broader team. Everyone I've interacted with at the company is really nice and welcoming, so it's been fun. It is a little different working at a startup because there's like, well, I mean, I guess it's not too different. I've mostly worked at bigger companies,
Hmm.
um, I like the startup feel better so far because it's like our CTO is in a lot of meetings with us, so I know him, which I don't think I knew the CTO at any other company I've worked at. So it feels nice having like a direct link to these are the priorities, but also I'm technical. I know what you guys are doing and like know how to ask for things
Yeah.
for on the engineering side. And it's just like cool having a direct line to him if I need it. And we have our first work get together next month, so I get to travel to Seattle, which is exciting.
Oh, nice. Now,
Yeah.
is this, to your knowledge, is this a company where they are looking to remain with the like at the size that they are, or do you know if they potentially are looking at expanding, getting bigger, 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 that sort of a thing? I ask because
We're
you mentioned like
definitely
you kind of like the startup feel, and I feel like sometimes that can change. Obviously,
yeah, we're definitely growing. And for anyone who doesn't know, my frames of reference have been Comcast, which is a massive company. And that
that's an
one was like,
understatement.
yeah. So, like, I didn't know, you know,
Yeah.
like a quarter of the people that worked there. And there was a lot of my team was accidentally duplicating work of another team because there's not a lot of talking between a lot of the teams because the company's so big. And then it's like, different organizations and yeah, kind of a mess. And then I worked at Angie, which is like I guess a medium sized company, but a couple thousand employees. So we were like the one data science team, but it was still like I don't know. The startup feel I like so far, I think it's just easier to know where to go for information. Granted, there is less like documentation so far.
Right. Right.
But it's like, okay, this person probably has this knowledge. And since our team is so small, I know who that person is versus like at Comcast, it's like, oh, you need to talk to this person. And then come to find out that person quit like 2 months prior. And then you're like, okay,
Yep.
but who did they pass their knowledge to? And it's like, oh, they didn't. And then,
Yep.
yeah, like stuff like that. So it's nice. And it's just like nice knowing, I guess, everyone like on the engineering team. So I'm like on data analytics, which is a subset of engineering.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's good that
Yeah.
things are starting to kind of come together. I definitely think that'll be interesting as you continue down the path of harmonizing all of the different
Hmm.
things kind of going on. I can imagine that also then affects or starts to, I guess, shift an understanding of, okay, your athlete roster, like how much is enough, too much, and
Yeah.
then the athlete, the the level of care that each athlete needs definitely from my perspective makes a big difference in how many athletes you can handle,
Yeah.
like things like that. So for example, like I've got a decent amount of people who have been with me for multiple years at this point, so it's like I could definitely take on more, and also it's like I don't know if I really want to, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun
Definitely. I
stuff.
will. I will not be taking on any new athletes for quite some time, if
Yeah.
ever.
Okay.
Well, at the present moment, obviously, who knows like
Yeah.
when people are gonna leave or what that'll look like. But yeah, I feel like I'm in like a good place now. I've got a couple athletes who this is their last month, so then I think October will be a little better too. So I feel like I'm like right on the cusp of too much, just enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be an interesting one to revisit. A couple months or so from now, especially since then at that point, it's not that you'll necessarily know everything about your job. You will though have more of a footing and knowing, where to
Yeah.
go, who to talk to, that sort of a thing. So cool. I think that'll be something that'll also be relatable for a decent amount of people who listen to the show too. Because there's a lot
Hmm.
of parallels between balancing coaching or harmonizing coaching and other career paths, and
Yeah.
that parallel of how you handle harmonizing like your training with your like everyday responsibilities and how much is too much and all that stuff. So start working on bringing that into the conversation. That'll be fun. Yeah. All right.
I know.
What else you
I,
got,
I
updates
I
wise?
really remember how it is to
Yeah.
have to get my run done at a certain time. So I really needed this
Yeah.
when I was doing the morning challenge back in June because now it's like I gotta log on by 8:30 or 9, so I gotta be done with my run.
No, you
So
would have had an unfair advantage then. So yeah. Now.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right.
Let's see. What else? I started using my Whoop again.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Every now and then I get the urge to restart my Whoop just for the data it provides. It's mostly like I'm just curious about sleep. That's
Have you
like the
kept the
biggest
monthly
thing.
membership going throughout, even when you're not using it?
Oh no, no, no.
Or did you
I
pay for the
pause.
year, or how did that go? Okay, gotcha.
I re
Oh,
since
okay. You
I
do the pause.
Yeah, I did the pause, and since I did the pause, I can restart monthly without like the 6 month commitment, which I think is what they require
Right.
if you
Yeah.
just sign up.
Uh huh.
But I might switch to one of the like not the 6 month. That wouldn't be smart. I might switch to the annual because I do like my Whoop, and now that I have steady income, I feel like I can not live such a pared down lifestyle.
That's
So
fair. That's fair. The way
I
the way
have
you worded that was yeah. All right. Anyways.
Well, I
Yeah.
feel like with coaching, I have like pared things down and tried not to spend like unnecessary money while, trying to figure out is coaching sustainable? Do I want it to be sustainable? All that. But now I got that tech money back, so I can restart
It's
my Whoop.
like, it is up. She is big balling now. Yeah. All right.
So, yeah, I started with just a month because I just wanted to see. And I've been liking it so far. It is kind of annoying. I do wear my Garmin and my Whoop when I run, but whatever. I
Opposite
can.
opposite wrists.
Yeah, I moved my Whoop to my right wrist and
Yeah.
put the Garmin on the left.
Do you wear your Whoop when you're sleeping? Because I know you don't wear your
Yes.
Garmin. Okay.
Whoop is the only thing I can wear to sleep. It's the only thing comfortable enough.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's the nature of like this cloth-like band
That band. Yeah.
and like the shape of the sensor, because the Garmin part of it is like this band to be tight enough it digs into my wrist, and then after a while I'm like I get this thing off me.
Yeah,
And
it
then
does
like
for sure leave like the little
indentations.
indentions and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, I'm just used to it at this point, but yes, I totally know what you're talking about.
yeah. I think I would get used to it, but I don't want to. And then the watch
That's
face is
fair.
so big and clunky, compared to a Whoop, I should say.
Well, that's because you have like the baller model.
But I
Don't you
still
have
have
a
the small
Phoenix
one.
or something?
Yeah, but I have the 42 millimeter, so the small one. That small wrist.
The small Phoenix.
It is.
That's
There's
like
one that's 46
I've
millimeter.
got the entry level Porsche. The small. Okay, the small
It's just
Phoenix.
it's just
Okay,
the size of the watch face
yeah,
for tiny
okay,
wrists.
yeah, I
Anyway,
gotcha.
I've been really liking the Whoop. There was something I was gonna say. Oh, I texted you about this, but they did update their strength training tracking. It is kind of annoying because you have to, if you want it to more accurately track the strain of strength training, you have to enter basically the exercises you did and then like how many sets, how many reps, weight, all that stuff. So
Immediately no.
it's a bit tedious. But I have
For
been doing
real?
it for real. Yeah. I mean, how else would it? Because it needs like your load, volume and load, along with the accelerometer. I don't know how they do it, but yeah. But the good thing, well, I mean, good thing, you can save workouts. So like once you put in workouts for a strength session, you save it as something. So
Yeah,
like in theory, a lot of us are doing the same workout week after week. We're just changing reps or weight, maybe another set. So it's really easy once it's in there to just like click it and update. So like that's what I did today because I did a very similar workout to last week. But yeah, the first time it's like really annoying.
yeah. That just like I said, immediately no. It's just very cumbersome to me.
Yeah. I have no data to back this, but if I had to guess, if I were Whoop, actually, I would try to integrate with some kind of like a lot of us have strength apps where we track our
Mm-hmm.
things, try
Yeah.
to integrate with that and just pull it, sync the data together. So there's less friction for the user. But I don't know. I don't know if they have
Some
plans for that or anything.
You're talking about some sort of like strength training app, and then it just uploads that as, hey, this is what I did. Kind of like train. Have you used Train Heroic before?
No, but I've heard about it.
That interface. Okay.
It's kind of like True Coach, right?
Kinda. I'll just say
Or like
kinda, just because there's
Trainerized.
so many.
I don't know. There's so many of them.
Yeah, there's so many ways that you can describe it, and then if you really want to be snobby, you can be like, well, no, that's actually not the same thing.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's
Yeah,
why they
it
haven't
just
tried to integrate it with something.
it's just what immediately jumps out to me is, okay, so let's add some additional steps and overcomplicate something that already has a propensity to be like overanalyzed in the wrong hands. So like tracking your strength training, why does it need to be for the most accurate? Why do we need that all this manual stuff to be done
Yeah.
in order to get close to, optimal? I'm not even going to say accurate because, whatever, but
Well,
I
how
know.
else would they do it though?
I I don't know. I'm just allowed to be negative sometimes.
Yeah.
What can I
Well,
say? I'm biased,
think
and you know this.
yeah.
When it
Well,
comes
what Whoop
to,
has going for them is
yeah,
I'm about to make a generalization about Whoop users.
are you about
They
to make a
are
hot take
no,
or an unpopular
it's not a
opinion?
hot take.
Oh,
I
okay,
don't think
okay,
it might be an uneducated take. Anyway, I think a lot of Whoop users are like bougie comes to mind, data nerds. Like they're willing to take that extra step to make their strain accurate for strength training. You know.
yeah, I could, yeah, I
So I think
guess,
that's why it works. And you also have the option to not do that. So like I usually track my strength under a functional fitness workout and then
right,
it does the normal strain just with the heart rate and then it's like do you want to add exercises so we can calculate your muscular load?
yeah. So that's the so my beef with Whoop as a as a helpful tracking device comes into play when the primary form of exercise is hypertrophy, strength training, powerlifting, that sort of a thing. So if
Mm-hmm.
you are not so when someone is asking me for my feedback on like, hey, I'm looking for a tracker, looking for some sort of wearable, some sort of fitness tracker, that sort of thing. I always start off with, what are you looking for it to provide for you? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the help me understand question. Like, okay, so what are you looking for the device to do? Because there's so many different ways that you can go. Are you looking for a
Yeah.
fitness tracker that has smartwatch capabilities? Are you looking for a smartwatch that can track some of your fitness? Because those are two avenues that can be very, very different. For those who are not aware, I work additionally, on top of coaching, I work in an industry where I'm often asked questions like this. So I'm not like just some random like mouth breather on the internet who's like reviewing random things. So, and I've been in a position before where I've been on calls and in meetings with people from those different companies. So Whoop, Garmin, I don't think anybody from Fitbit was on at the time. I think at the time it was Pebble. Like, so they've got some insight here, right? So
Yeah.
I think that because for so long it became super apparent that your cardiovascular output was the thing that measured the most, like had the most, it got the biggest piece of the pie for your strain, then you could have a ball out like super heavy lifting session where you have just like really left it all out on the floor and you would get like basically like a nothing strain. like the same strain as when you went for a walk or something like that.
Yeah.
So it would tell you that your recovery score was fantastic. And I'm like, there's, and that wasn't just a one off. So, and I think that's clear that it wasn't a one off because Whoop has clearly heard that feedback and really tried to put energy into, okay, how can we improve this? Especially because I think within the CrossFit space,
Oh
that's where it
yeah.
was really coming up because within the CrossFit space, there's more conversation around like it just not being about like, you know, 125 reps of every movement. It's also about like there being strength and there's a balance between that. And now they're starting to try and bring more like bodybuilding and hypertrophy type movements in there, all that stuff. So that's just my thing that it would be. I know there's not an answer for it right now. And also there's got to be like a better way to be able to measure strain from a lifting session that becomes more optimal that doesn't involve sitting down and having to retype, exactly what you're doing. For people who
Yeah.
probably are already doing it, I think you've got a great idea. If there could be some sort of integration with an app like Strong, or there's another one called Heavy, Hevy, where you can just track your workouts in there. And if that automatically like uploaded into that interface, that would be super. That would probably save people a bunch of time. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna
That's
get
why
off
I
my
wonder if
Whoop
like
soapbox. So
yeah. I wonder if that's like on their
yeah,
roadmap for like
that's a good point.
an
Maybe so.
eventual. Yeah, I would be curious because like we just mentioned, there's a lot of different strength apps. So it'd be like, I wonder which ones they are able to connect to, which ones they would prioritize connecting to, that kind of thing. But they have the ability because like you can send your activities right now to like Strava or Training Peaks. So like there's third party integrations already. They don't really do like the other way. So like they don't pull something from Strava, but
Right.
I don't know. I feel like
Yeah.
maybe one day.
Be interesting. Yeah. I think that it's a great I think it's a great device to have for those who are looking to get an understanding of how their overall habits impact their recovery. So for example, like
Yeah.
how when they ingest certain things, when they are like what their nutrition looks like, what their sleep looks like, food choices that they make prior to sleeping, alcohol consumption, all that stuff. Like it definitely, I think it's definitely a great one there. So I think when it comes to activity, if people scope out a bit wider and they just look at it as like just overall activity versus like, okay, well, if I do more cardio or less this, that impacts my strain. I think that looking at the overarching picture and really looking at manipulation of nutrition and low impact movement like walking and things like that, and then especially their sleep habits and their alcohol consumption, like those things, you totally see how that impacts your recovery score. I'm laughing because I was just talking to a guy last week, probably in his I'd say early 20s, who was asking for some advice on a tracker, and he had decided he wanted to get a Whoop ahead of time. So he was just asking me a couple of questions about it. And then as we were kind of finishing up the interaction, he was just like, yeah, I'm pretty pumped to, just kind of see, how my workouts impact my recovery and whatnot. And just, he was with two of his buddies, and they're all like, we live in a town where we live in Bloomington, so Illinois State University is here, so we get a decent amount of college students. So they, in between the conversation, they're talking about like, yeah, we're going to go out to so-and-so this tonight and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, P.S., man. One, like, make sure you keep it on for a while so that you can learn your benchmark.
Yeah.
You know how you have to register. How many recoveries is it? It's a bunch, isn't it now?
I think when you first started, it's like 21, but
Okay. I was going to
I
say
don't
28, but
know.
I don't know
It
how
might be
many it is now.
28. I
Okay.
might be mixing up apps, but mine started right away. I'm guessing
Okay.
it just used like my historical data, even though it's been like two
Yeah.
years. But
But yeah, so anyways, I was telling him, hey, just, I really suggest just lay low for a while. Like don't really get all up in your head about what it's reporting or things like that, because it's going to take probably close to a month. I was telling him 28. I wasn't sure, Like it might be about a month before you really get a benchmark. And
Yeah.
PS, like you guys are talking about balling out tonight, just as a heads up, like your recovery score will tank every time you take a drink. And the look of horror on his face, I was like, sorry to tell you, man, but get ready because it is not
Yeah.
forgiving when you drink. Generally, the feedback that I've heard from clients that have had it and other coaches and stuff like that. Because when I had mine for about a year and a half, I wasn't drinking at the time. I'm well past that at this point, so I never experienced that. But I would hear that from people all the time. So if they would go out, they would just take it off. And I was like, that's not really helping you, but okay,
No.
you know. Anyways, all right. Well, we just totally topic one, Whoop. There we go.
Whoop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My
Anyways.
last update. I'll keep this pretty well. I'll try to keep it quick. I
You're
started a
good.
new strength program. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, and it's not. There's nothing like I
No
didn't
more
dislike.
Natasha.
No more Natasha. I didn't dislike it by any means, but there is a guy in Boulder who owned a gym and works with a lot of elite pro runners and normal runners, but a lot of like the elites go to him. And we connected on Instagram and I met him for coffee and he is developing his own strength app specifically for endurance athletes. And so I don't know if it's available for individuals, but he's rolling it out to coaches. So I'm using it with my athletes who want to use it now. But basically, you put in your races, whether it's like A, B, or C race, and then you answer a bunch of questions like your strength training history, what equipment you have, and then there's a list of required equipment. And then from there, it builds your whole program. And it does what I like and why I switched is because it does like your periodization with your races, which is like with Natasha's app, I would have to do it myself. And quite frankly, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really nice because like it will build in the deload weeks for the weeks I have races. And then for my A race, it like completely removes strength training the
Wow.
week of it. And yeah, and it'll update the exercises as I go along, get closer to my A race. And it requires you after each exercise to say how hard it felt. And then, like, if you say something's too difficult at a certain weight, for the subsequent sets, it will adjust the weight for you and make you, well, not make you, but suggest
Yeah.
that you decrease in weights, etc. So it's really cool. I'm really liking it so far. And it has 2 strength workouts a week and 2 mobility. So for the first time in my life, I have started doing mobility
Oh
consistently.
my gosh. You're
Yeah,
doing mobility work?
twice a week. And I started it last week, so that's saying a lot. Because like I
Wow.
said, last week was hectic. But yeah, I like it a lot. And especially because, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this and why you work with the coach. When you're making your own strength programming, or like obviously I was using Natasha's app for a bit, you get stuck in like the same exercises that you tend to do, or like the
Right.
pool gets quite small unless you like actively seek out other exercises and variations. And that's just a lot more effort than I want to put for. So this is nice because it's like I did rack pulls the other day. I can't tell you the last time I did rack pulls because I always just default to like deadlifts or RDLs. But rack pull is a great other hinge exercise that I never would have thought to integrate. So, and I just do really well with someone telling me what to do.
Yeah. That is
And the app
so
is nice.
interesting. Do
Yeah,
you are you able to share the name of the app or anything, or is it or no, basically?
I think
If
so.
not, it's fine.
The app is Which Weight,
Huh.
and the
Okay.
gym in Boulder is Kinesis Integrated. So Chris is the owner. He's the one who started the app.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it
really
just
cool. I think
sounds.
you'd like it a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like. Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like something that a friend of or an acquaintance of mine was working on development wise and rolling out to coaches like probably about a year and a
Ooh,
half, 2 years ago. So yeah, I'd be curious if maybe that's a offshoot of that. I don't know. Anyways, okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. And all the
All right,
programming is done by Chris, who
that's
has
awesome.
been, yeah, he's been
Yeah.
training runners specifically. And I think when you first do it, you can choose your sport. I didn't look at the other sports, obviously, because I just chose running. but
Right.
I'm pretty sure you can do like cycling or something like that. Other endurance sports, I think,
That's
are the
awesome.
main focus. Yeah. So
Okay.
very exciting there. And yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, that will be directly linked to the main topic that we're going to get into shortly here. So,
Mm.
a couple of updates I got on my end. First one is more training related and whatnot. So I'm right around the 5-ish week mark of my cut. So about 5 in the 5th week, we'll call it, of
Hmm.
fat loss. So I just put out an episode yesterday where I kind of talked about some things at the beginning. Just overall, it's moving along from a results standpoint, moving along as expected, and also something that I was talking to my coach about. And sometimes I I like pause before I'm like trying to put the words together to explain it because I've had these conversations sometimes with clients where out of nowhere they'll be like, yeah, and I heard you mention like this particular thing on your podcast, and so I just decided like that's how I'm going to do it too. And I was like, whoa, hold on, hold on.
Like in
It's like
relation to what?
on in relation. So here's the example that I'll give you. So
Okay.
right now results are pretty much in line when it comes to where my weight trajectory is. Like the average weight dropped per week is pretty much like right there. And that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that I've been as tight on the days where I have the opportunity to be tight as I could have been. And when I say
Mm.
tight, so for example, an expectation that I have of myself is that I'm tracking consistently throughout the day or throughout the week,
Hmm.
that I'm pre-logging a decent amount of my food so that there's
Yeah.
not a whole lot of guesswork and stuff like that. And as I'm going back to reevaluate or reflect on, okay, the past week, there's like these reflections of, okay, well, here's where average weight is. Here's where body composition is as far as measurements. Here's how things look with pictures. So on paper, it's like, yo, you're on the right path. Like
Yeah.
everything's all good, right? Like everything's gravy. And then though, when I look at how it's being done, I'm not like super uncomfortable, like
Oh,
at all. Yeah. So
interesting.
yeah. So what I mean by that is an example is there are a couple of days where I haven't really pre-logged, I haven't really pre-planned. I kind of just, I basically kind of went with the flow for that particular day and pieced things together and all that good stuff, and still got the outcome, the expected
Mm.
outcome within the range, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't necessarily stick to the process the way that I expect to stick to that process. So where I say that that message can somewhat get skewed, or where I can have somebody like hear something different than what I intend them to hear, is
Hmm.
I also talk to people about like, listen, not everything has to be completely difficult. Like sometimes you're just going with the flow, and sometimes progress feels like, I've talked about this on my podcast, like sometimes progress feels like you're just treading water. And when you
Hmm.
actually take like the bird's eye view, you actually aren't just treading water, you're actually moving along. It's
Yeah.
just, it does, like everything doesn't have to feel like 75 hard. It doesn't have to feel like that. And so sometimes, people will be like, well, I don't get it. Like you're telling me that just because I don't feel like I'm depriving myself and I'm super restricted and I'm like waking up hungry in the middle of the night, like you're telling me that just because I don't feel like that doesn't mean I'm making progress. But then I heard you say on your podcast, like, that's kind of how you feel, but you're saying that there's room for improvement. That doesn't make sense. So I have to remind myself that my story is my story. And
Mm.
so if there's somebody who's listening who is one of my clients, like your responsibility is to reach out to me so that I can walk you through your
Yeah.
scenario and your situation. Uh, so yeah, what it really comes down to is I look at it as I recognize that there are particular results that I'm getting right now. without being not gonna, it's not a free for all by any means. I just
Hmm.
see where the opportunities are. So it's I recognize those milestones, recognize that I'm hitting the path that I want to be on. And I also look at, okay, well, there's an opportunity though where this could be better if I really, if I really stuck to planning things out. Because that's the thing. There's going to be days where I'm not going to say I can't plan things out, but where planning things out is really stressful. There are
Yeah.
going to be days where sticking to the plan is really a problem. So if I know that, why make it a problem on days where it doesn't need to be a problem?
Hmm.
So that's kind of what I'm talking about. So long story medium, that's how things are going in the cut. So while it may not have sounded like it, things are moving along just fine
And
with that.
what's your end date, right? Couple
So
weeks?
initially it was going to be a couple of weeks because we're going to be down at Parents Weekend to see
Oh
Ava
yeah.
in a couple of weeks. So that's when we were going to basically be reversing out of that. However, with things moving along the way that they are, right now, what we're planning is that that'll be somewhat of like a reset week, a few days of what we'll
Mm,
call a diet break, just from a mental standpoint, and
yeah.
then get get back into it and see if we can push the envelope here, like really push it a
Oh,
bit more. So yeah,
fun.
we'll see where things are at. So what I had noted in my notes for the update though, over this past few days is when I've started to now periodically have some lower energy during training
Mm.
sessions, where like that third set out of three really is like, ooh, this might be a good day to just bring it down to two, like that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
also along with that, I've been playing this game of like, am I sick or am I just low energy? Like, which one of those things is
Mm.
it? Because like
Yeah.
the other day I just like cut it. I think I did one leg exercise and I was just like, nah, today I don't know what's up, but today's not the day. So I just left a note for my coach, like, yeah, I don't know what's up, but just today's not the day. I've got flexibility. I'll,
Mm.
push it off till tomorrow. And, of course he's like, you're consistent as all get out. Like it doesn't really matter. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm just letting you know. And then later on that day, it was like runny nose, like the whole, like, is this a cold or an allergy or the flu?
Mm.
Like, which is this? So I was like, well, maybe it's because I'm sick. I don't know. And then the next morning, totally fine. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's
Weird.
basically the haps during this fat loss phase training and all that stuff. So just things have been skating along pretty well, and then over the last it's been like this past week really
Okay.
that I'm really feeling like some of that low energy coming on. So it's
Yeah.
it's to be expected, when you're in a deficit at some point you're gonna have to pay the man. So here we go.
Is this when historically it has happened for you?
Yes, yeah.
Mm.
4 times where I've actually stuck with it for this long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely why. So this is also why I said this, like, I think 2 days in, I texted one of my best friends and I was like, I have quickly 2 days in been reminded of why I don't understand people who want to diet like all the time. It's
It's
like, not if
miserable.
you're not really dieting, like really dieting.
Yeah.
Those people that like really are committed to it, like you're special kind. Because wow, this is like not my favorite.
It's a
Yeah,
lot of energy expended to keep it
yeah,
going.
big time.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I've gotten, we'll jump into the topic. It's really this observation about
I'm
people getting
so
less and
so
less
curious
patient.
what this is.
Yeah. So a most recent example that I have
Mm.
of this. So just a most recent example, and I say most recent
Mhm.
because I think I'm a very observant person. So I
Mhm.
see this often.
Yeah.
So we're at Mace's baseball game, and it's like his last game of the season. So we're at a field where the scoreboard, so the scoreboard's out in the outfield like most baseball
Mhm.
scoreboards are, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is the school, what is it? The school recently like upgraded the scoreboard or the hardware or something like that. So in theory, the device that you use to update the scoreboard, you shouldn't have to sit like right under the scoreboard for the signal to connect. It's
Oh,
like
okay.
wireless, right? But they've had some issues periodically where sometimes the scoreboard would be really slow in updating. So it's like to the point where sometimes like the great parents who like volunteer to actually update, keep score and game changer and all that stuff, like they sometimes would have to like sit underneath the scoreboard so that it would try to update a little bit quicker. But the other day, it just reminded me of how impatient sometimes people can be, especially in moments where it's definitely not critical, like at all.
Most moments are not critical.
I would, I emphatically agree with you. I emphatically co-sign. I just said to my client the other day was something that was co-sign. I was like, I've co-signed with the good pen on this one because, yeah, it was a situation where I think the score was like 6-1. And
Okay.
so like, I think it was Mace. Yeah. Mace's team like scores another run. So it's 7-1. Right. And so the game changer, which the most baseball parents will know game changer. It's like the app that you use for tracking and stuff like that. So the game changer updates, it's 7-1. Everybody knows it's 7-1. The ump knows it. Like everybody knows it's 7-1, right? And then you've got like somebody in the crowd who's just like, well, do you think we need to go tell them that they need to change the score? I'm like, no, we really don't need to tell them that they need to change the score. And the people who run the scoreboard are sitting about like 4 feet in front of me.
Yeah.
So it's just simply a matter of it being delayed,
Yeah.
right? So they've done it. It's just delayed. And we're talking like 40 seconds into this.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those things that's like, it's almost like the impatience, like microaggression. Like it's just this little thing. It's just like, man, like is this really that stressful? Because it was like for a good like 2 minutes, person was like, well, that's ridiculous that you have to wait to have the score updated. And I said, well,
Oh my
do
God.
you know that it's 7-1? They're like, well, yeah. I'm like, do you think the ump knows it's 7-1? Well, maybe, but still, it should be up on the scoreboard. That's ridiculous. It's not up on the scoreboard. I'm like, all right, okay, all right then. you know, so just friendly reminder, folks. Like sometimes it doesn't need to be all that serious, for real. It was just
Yeah.
wild. It was just it was more entertaining than anything. Where I was just like, oh, such another example of how it's like this microwave society where we just want
Oh, yeah.
everything ready like right now. And now even,
Instantaneous.
yeah, now I'm guilty of being that person who doesn't even wait for the microwave to finish. When there's like 3 seconds left, I'll just cancel and pull it out. I definitely do that. Yeah.
I feel like that's different though.
Do you? Well, why do you
Yeah.
feel like it's different? I have a theory. Why do you think it's different?
I mean, I don't, I mean, 3 seconds is like negligible.
Oh,
One.
okay. I was
Two,
thinking you
you're,
possibly were going to be like, well, if all that beeping is going to be a problem, like you're going to
I
wake
was about
somebody
to
up or
say,
something.
then you get it before the alert goes off.
I can't lie. I can't lie that's actually not like the reason that I do it. It's just like sometimes I want my popcorn,
Yeah,
you know?
no. I
Yeah.
mean, especially with popcorn. It's
Yeah.
like,
Sometimes it's like hot and fresh. It's ready.
oh yeah, and like what's 3 seconds going to do? Just pop one more kernel?
True. True.
Or like if you use the popcorn setting, you might already be at the point where you're burning it.
I will say, like, I don't know what brand of over the counter or yeah, over the range microwave that we have, but it is like spot on. You hit that popcorn button twice, start, pop to perfection every time. Yeah, it's amazing.
That
Anyways,
sounds amazing.
all right, those are my updates and such. So
Excellent.
let's roll into today's topic. So today's topic is we're gonna review an article. So this is a point where if you have not read this article, which most likely you haven't unless you're an avid reader of Outside Magazine or OutsideOnline.com, I'm going to recommend that you possibly pause and go check out this article. It might take about 4 minutes to read, 4 or 5. Does that seem
It depends how
reasonable to you,
fast you
Kelly?
read. I
Okay.
think it took me longer. I'm not a fast reader though.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, you get a general idea. But
Yeah. It's
if
not
you
super
want
long.
to, yeah. And so if you want to feel like kind of you don't want to be in a conversation where it's like, well, I've never seen that movie or anything in that genre before, I'd recommend read the article. It's, let's say it's in the 5 to 8 minute range, somewhere around there. But this is an article that was entitled The Case Against Personalized Workout Plans. So we're going to discuss here for a little bit. Is personal training, are personalized workout plans, individual workout plans, are they overrated? Is it gimmicky? Is it just hype? Or does individualized training truly make a difference? So we're going to use that as our topic today. And this article was sent to me by one of my clients. So shout out to Amy. I don't think she listens to this podcast, but shout out Amy for sending me this article to get my thoughts on it. And I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. We're just going to do a whole podcast about it. So
Yeah.
in this particular article, again, as the title states, discussing how critical is it really, is my translation, how critical is it that people have specific training in order to achieve the best possible result? Like, does that really matter? So, how do you feel about starting us off with your thoughts from reading this particular article?
Well, I'll let the
No?
people know. I read this days ago, so
Oh,
my
that's
memory's
fair.
not the freshest, but I
Okay.
do remember what I thought about it. I'm curious how you interpreted this because I don't know if I interpreted it correctly.
Oh, okay. Well,
So, what I oh, you
here's
want to go?
here's one thing that I will throw out there about
Yeah.
interpretation. It's not about this article. To
Okay.
me, interpretations are not, especially in this case, there's not a right or a wrong way to interpret this,
I feel like
an
there might
article
be.
like this.
It's how I interpreted their definition of personalized training.
Okay. Okay. So going
So,
back to the overall topic again, folks, this is an article where it talks about some different studies that were done that compared different workouts and different groups and things like that, and really came down to it saying that at the end of the day, training is training.
yeah.
So most people, generally, from it's saying most people could follow a the same training program and get benefits out of that. That training is training at the end of the day. It doesn't need to be like individualized, personalized, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Boom. Okay, so how did you?
So,
What's your controversial hot take?
it's not controversial or hot take, but what I took from it, what I thought they were trying to say is their definition of personalized training, at least like in the running world, would be like you respond better to VO2 max intervals, short and fast things. So you
Yeah,
should train that way. I respond better to tempo threshold, so more sustained, longer intervals. So I should train that way. And they're saying that doesn't really matter. That's simplified. But I
and that's an
and
actual
what I
example they used too. So
okay. And
yeah.
what I said to you when we were talking about this over text was like, duh. Because like when I'm making training for someone, it's not about what kinds of workouts they respond to best. Uh, like what they respond to best might implement how much of a certain workout I give them versus someone else, but for the most part, the race is what dictates what kind of training we do, what order we do training. But like for the most part, every one of my athletes who has been running long enough, has a good enough base, that kind of thing, like beginners not included, will be doing at some point in the year VO2 max intervals, tempo or threshold intervals, steady state, race pace, easy, slow runs, long, slow distance, like everyone does everything. And then it's like, depending on what you're training for, that dictates what your training plan looks like. When we do it in relation to the race, what order we go in as we progress, that kind of thing. But it's not like, oh, athlete A responds better to VO2 max intervals. So even though she's training for 50K, I'm just going to have her do intervals the entire time leading up to that. Because I think for the most part, the everyday athlete, we're nowhere near our potential. So for all of us, we can improve like VO2 max, lactate threshold, aerobic capacity, all of those things. So it's beneficial to do everything. And then I kind of don't like their title because where personalization comes in is like, okay, how do we apply it to you in the context of your life? So like how many speed
Mm,
workouts a week, what's your schedule look like? Um, and then like taking into account injuries, prior injuries, that kind of thing. Like maybe you can't handle, 24 minutes of VO2 max workouts, but we can start you at 10 or 12, that kind of thing. So like the specifics within the workouts, but yeah, I think the maybe it's just because I started coaching at a point where that I wasn't taught to even think about that.
oh,
Thinking about
really?
like how people no, it was just like here's usually we've talked about this before. Like leading up to the race, you want to start with the least specific type of running and work up to the most specific. But within that, everyone, assuming you have enough lead up time to the race,
Yeah.
you hit everywhere on the spectrum. It's not like we leave out one just because you don't respond to it.
Yeah.
And like how
So
would you even
very,
measure that
so
outside of
very
like doing a
much
study like
like,
they did?
okay. Okay. So more like so what's the difference between that and then quote unquote cookie cutter?
Well, cookie cutter, I feel like doesn't take into account anything about the individual athlete. Like
It's,
cookie cutter is like, okay,
sorry.
you're gonna run. And to be clear, some of my athletes' schedules like do look the same,
Hmm.
just because there are certain schedules that are good templates. And just
Right.
because we want to make
Yeah.
something individual doesn't mean we shouldn't use it. But it would be like everyone's going to do, easy run Tuesday, workout Wednesday, easy run Thursday, cross train Friday, long run Saturday, easy run
Yeah.
Sunday, and then rest Monday, which that is a pretty typical schedule. But I would say cookie cutter is like that's applied to everyone. If you don't, have a lifestyle that fits in like nurses,
Too
atypical
bad. Yeah.
schedules, yeah, good luck. Um, or even, and then I think the other thing about cookie cutter is cookie cutter has like a standard progression and it doesn't take into account how are you actually feeling within training and in relation to the stresses of your life, how you're sleeping, nutrition, everything that we always talk about. So personalized training will adapt with you as the plan goes along and then we change things along the way, but it's not I feel like it's not really around like what kind of workout are we doing. It's like,
Mm,
okay,
okay.
during this block we're doing this kind of workout. And maybe during a certain week you're really stressed at work, so either I'm going to cut the workout in half so you still get some time and intensity but it's not as stressful, or we switch it to an easy run versus like cookie cutter would be like you got to do this progression. Go do your workout.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. That's, I'm glad you brought up like where things where things started for you from a coaching standpoint and
Hmm.
how you saw the lack of this really being applied. Like it was very much like very structured, it seems like,
Yeah.
or like rigid. Let me put it that way. Very rigid structure. It's like, okay, well, basically like bump what you say. This is what needs to be done, sort of a thing. I do think so. Again, this is why I recommend people reading the article because we're not going to do like a whole deep dive and like,
Yeah.
summarize every single thing that was in the article because there are a decent amount of like different little subplots, I guess I'll call
Hmm.
it, like kind of within the article because there's even some links to some other studies that were done in some other articles. I mean, it is a magazine, so a well-written article on a website is going to like entice you to stay on the website longer and go to other articles. And there was actually
Yeah.
a link to another article that they had done, or that the author I think had actually covered around like the different responses that different people respond differently to different sets and reps for strength building. So in this article, this one was primarily, I would say to your point, primarily geared towards runners and endurance, because it started off with, I think the researcher's name was Gerd. Yeah, Brendan Gerd, a 2016 study where he first started off was saying that, some people respond better to interval workouts and some responded better to endurance. And when I say responded better to, if I remember correctly, the end point that they were trying to reach was improving someone's VO2 max. And so the idea was, okay, this group improved their VO2 max because they responded better to the interval workouts that they did. And then this other group did endurance workouts and they improved their VO2 max better by doing more or less endurance workouts. I can't remember exactly how the thing was. What was really interesting though, is like he does this study in 2016, right? And so he's like, okay, conclusion is you need to be able to figure out what type of workout that you best respond to. So I think that's how he overall was defining personalized training. It's basically like find the workout style that works best for you. So he's basically taking the information from that and then translating that into that's typically what researchers are going to do. They're going to theorize and hypothesize like, okay, we've got this information. Now, could that possibly apply to strength training? Could that possibly apply to recovery from injury? Like you've got 25 people with femur injuries, but we have 5 different protocols. Maybe we test all 5 protocols on each of those people and then see like who responds to what. What was really interesting though is then some years later, he and his team, I believe, they go back and they review the data, and instead of looking at the averages, they look at the individual results of each of the participants. And that's what I thought was actually pretty interesting, was instead of saying, okay, group A had this average, they were like, here are all the results from group A, from the lowest responder to the highest responder. So that's where this article, for those that really like kind of like to nerd out, that's where this article got like really interesting, because then they basically kind of redid things by looking at different other studies. So what's called a meta-analysis is when you take a whole bunch of other studies and put them together. So, or review a ton of studies and put that into one article. So they basically looked at a whole bunch of other studies, put the data together and looked at the individual stuff. And then they basically were like, yeah, there's really no evidence of a variation of the individual response when you actually look at individuals versus looking at groups. So they were like from your worst responder to your best responder, there's the same like gap when you look at all, let's say 20 people. But when you put the average together, that's where things look like they're different. So I thought that was interesting. I would say one of the lines that I did pull out of there was they said like in the revised conclusion. So basically after going back through and reviewing things, said Gerd's new study, however, found the individual variations observed in the original research. Okay, so the original research where he had this belief, his first conclusion was, things need to be very individualized. So, different people respond to different workouts differently. He said that was basically a mirage, concluding that training responses are largely uniform, with variation mostly due to, quote unquote, measurement errors or other lifestyle factors. Other lifestyle factors. So basically it brings into the conversation exactly what you were just talking about with, okay, when there is conversation or there are articles, or I've listened to podcasts before, a very well-known, actually, I'll just call it like Mind Pump. I remember
I used to listen to that.
Yeah, I remember an episode of Mind Pump where they specifically were talking about neurotype training, which is what I have a certification in. And I think that might have been the first time that you and I actually got together on a podcast. Was I was talking about personalization and neurotype training, right?
Mm-hmm.
And flat out called it a gimmick. They were like, it just
Oh.
sounds like, yeah, they're like, it sounds like a gimmick. They didn't really know about it, but they were like, yeah, it sounds like a gimmick. It was part of a qual, like the Q&A stuff that they do.
Hmm.
And they're like, yeah, it just sounds like a marketing gimmick, another way to try and sell, training, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, selling a certain type of diet, like the, ketovore diet or whatever you want to call it, like that sort of a thing. I have to give a shout out to my friend Mike because he brought that up on his podcast. He's like, what the F is a ketovore diet? He's like, I just heard about it. And I laughed when I heard that because I was like, I have not heard that one and I can tell that it's not going to turn out well.
No.
So, even when those guys were talking about it, they were talking about like, it sounds gimmicky. It's just overhyped. At the end of the day, it's training is training. I think that you can start to split hairs if you want to on like, what's the definition of personalized training
Yeah.
and personal training and individualized training. And I've definitely been that person who's tried to split hairs on that before.
I think
And
there are
this is
different degrees of it.
yeah, I think so. So if you put it in the bucket, I think if you put it in a bucket like this, like back to Gerd's initial work with, okay, we have one outcome that we're looking for. So we're trying to improve this particular thing. So if I were to look at it in my scope, it's like we are trying to gain muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We're trying to gain muscle. It's like, well, there's group A gained muscle by doing high weight and low reps, and
Mm-hmm.
group B gained muscle by doing high reps and low weight. And so then the argument would be, well, does it really matter which one you do? At the end of the day, training is training. And it's like, well, group A responded better. So which does that mean? Which one is better? To me, that's not what I'm talking about when it comes to personalization, although that is part of like the neurotype training and all that stuff. It really is in application of the program itself, hands down. And I was on a yet to be released podcast talking about this probably about a month or so ago, where I was like, I truly think that the future of coaching is not specific to the program that you create. It is almost in like consulting and helping people navigate their way through how to properly apply
Yeah.
a program, how to properly navigate through the different advice that they get. Like it's almost like a concierge. Like, let me assist you. I'm your assistant navigating through this stuff. And I think that that's really what it's going to come down to. So I don't think that personalized workouts or individualized workouts are gimmicky. And also I'll recognize that I have a bias because I do one-on-one and I advertise that I do personalized
Yeah.
workouts. I think though that there's always going to be a better result if you can take into account when you take into account someone's individuality when it comes to the application of basic scientific principles.
Yeah.
That's my political stance. That's my platform. Boom.
I agree. And something you brought up, I forgot, but that was another like duh moment for me when they did say like, is this measuring the impact of exercise or are we measuring other things that we weren't tracking? Like diet, lifestyle, sleep make a big
Yeah.
difference in whether you're going to improve like your VO2
Yeah.
max is like it doesn't matter what you're doing for training. If you sleep better, you're going to get more out of your training. Full stop. you know? So like
You just broke the internet with that one. Like it, Yeah.
yeah. Another thing I found interesting was that it is not common for the studies around this topic to have a control group, which they specifically say in here that there was a lot of backlash from statisticians. And for anyone who doesn't know, I work with statistics. I have worked with statistics. So immediately I was like, how the heck can you draw any conclusions when you only have an experiment group and there's nothing to control it against? And
Yeah. So
that and like
basically,
the confounding variables of everything else.
Yeah, to make sure that I understood that part properly, since I do have a statistics expert on the podcast, to make sure I understood what that meant correctly, they were essentially saying they had, back to the initial example, they had one group that was doing sprints, one group that was doing intervals, but they didn't have a group at that time that was doing nothing.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Which
wild.
is like,
Like
yeah,
study experiment 101,
yeah, and
basically
that's what,
research 101. Yeah.
yeah, and that's one of the interesting graphs that you were mentioning. Once they did have a control group and they plotted the individual results, then you can see like even the control group who did nothing, like 40% of them increased their VO2 max. So that's kind of one of the drivers, I'm guessing, where they were like, maybe it's not the exercise that is the
Yeah.
driving factor here.
Yeah, this is indicative and reminds me of something that I bring up on the training calls that I'll do once a month for the pop group, where I will inevitably at some point remind somebody that I am the person who eats, sleeps, and breathes training, telling you that training is one of the lower impact, not like physically, I'm saying like when it comes to the things that truly affect your total daily energy expenditure, your TDEE. I can't remember the percentage off the top of my head right now, but EAT, or
Hmm.
exercise activity thermogenesis. So the amount of energy expended, or basically calories burned, energy expended, calories spent during exercise makes up a very like almost embarrassingly small percentage of how much energy you put out throughout a 24-hour period.
Hmm.
So overcomplicating it sometimes, like, I'm about personalization, and also personalization doesn't mean that we have to overcomplicate things. A lot of
Yeah.
the times what I will find is that what I would agree with, where I think some of this article is summarizing, is that at the end of the day, the basics and the foundations are the foundations. The basics are the basics. So if you
Hmm.
want the basics of a well-designed program built to help you build and or maintain muscle will typically have somewhere from, previously I had said somewhere around like 5 to 10, but really I think it's now skewing more towards like 8 to 12 or 8 to 15 sets per week per muscle group.
Hmm.
So, or sets per muscle group that you'll
Hmm.
see anywhere in that 8 to 12, 8 to 15 range. Hypertrophy typically would occur somewhere between 5 to 30 reps. So for most people, 8 to 12 kind of seems to be the sweet spot to be in for muscle. Like, it's those basic principles that when you
Yeah.
have those in a training program, and then where the personalization comes in is more, from my perspective, the personalization is more like, I can think of so many examples. I have a client who, like, 3 sets of something, she's like, good luck getting me to pay attention for 3 sets of anything, right?
Mm.
So does that mean I immediately go to 2 sets for everything? No. What we do is 3 sets for her A movement and her B movement, and then we do 2 sets of just about everything else. And then we talk
Hmm.
about the importance of really pushing it hard, since it's going to be 2 sets of those other things, like that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So to me, like, that's the personalization. Understanding that for some people, like, straight sets is where it's all about. Like, they love straight sets, like 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 8,
I
three
hate
sets of
that.
9, that sort of a thing. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, some people, like, that's helpful to them. Like, there's certain personality types where that just works really well for them.
Yeah.
Just mentally, it's less to think through. They're not having to, it's even gym layout can be different for different people. Like, if you
Yeah.
have a program that's like 5 different supersets, so then they're now worried about, like, well, I've got to hold the cable machine and I got to go grab this bench. It's stuff like that,
Yeah.
you know? And then
Hmm.
I think, yeah, there are definitely points where things like some particular individuals will respond better to explosive, like Olympic lifting type movements. and some will not respond as well, just based on like their chemistry, like their brain chemistry, like how they process things. Some people are like all about like, I got to be the big man or woman on campus. And some people are more like, I don't want people to notice me. So you work
Yeah.
that into how you design their training. Like I don't know. It's interesting. So I think there's definitely from my perspective, I think there's definitely this agreement that at the end of the day, training is training. And again, I'm the guy who like eats, sleeps, and breathes like individualization a lot of the times.
Yeah.
So training is training, and also application is different. And that's where I would say that I don't think that things like personal training, personalized workouts are a gimmick or overhyped. Because if that were the case, everybody could just buy a workout program, buy a running program, and they would be able to implement it just fine. Most people's issue is
Yeah.
not knowledge, it's implementation.
Yeah. And like when we're talking about pre-built plans, what I've seen a
Mm,
lot is people, even like, people like me who are really good at just like following directions.
yeah.
Inevitably, at some point, something's going to happen. You're going to skip a day, veer off the plan. And I feel like that's where a lot of people get hung up because they're like, should I
Yeah.
squeeze this in? Should I double up one a day? Should I push things? Should I just keep going? And it's like, depending on how much time I had off, what do I do now? I had COVID for 2 weeks. What do I do? Do I just hop back in? And yeah, then it's just like, if anything
Yeah.
goes wrong, you're kind of SOL.
Yeah. And I would even, I mean, life be lifing. That's what just popped into
Life be
my head.
life.
And
Yeah.
I would even, respectfully, I would actually challenge where it's like, if anything goes wrong, like life is, from my perspective, life is not supposed to be a straight line.
I'm just
So
saying, like in the static plan world, that assumes everything's going perfectly because you're going to be able to implement this plan
gotcha. Okay.
from like week 1 to week 16 as is. So assuming
Yeah.
like nothing goes wrong in quotes.
Right.
But like you're saying,
Yeah.
like in personalized training, you kind of like take that into account. We kind of
This is true.
assume it's going to
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think, just to start pulling the car back into the garage here, or land the plane. Isn't that the corporate term? Let's land the plane. So to land the plane here, I do think that within this article, we take it in a bit of a different direction just based on the nature of the work, like the very individualized work that we do with clients and like the personal work that we do with clients. I think in this article, where it starts from is, two different approaches. Like I look at that as two different styles of trying to get to the same end
Hmm.
result. So it's like if somebody were to come to me and say like, I want to improve my body composition, I want to, tone up. What's the best method to do that? Is it HIIT training or is it lifting weights? So if I'm just to say like, well, training is training, it doesn't matter, just move your body and make sure there's a dumbbell in your hand. Well, that's not quite specific enough, So the style would be very different and different people respond differently to those things. I think also taking into account, so we will wrap this up. They did talk in this article. Make sure you, for those that read it, check out the part about like the genetic influence. That was really interesting too, where it talked
Hmm.
about this assumption. I think somebody quoted in the article, I don't know if it was Gerd himself, but somebody in the article was quoted as basically saying like if they had to hypothesize, they think that maybe about genetics might impact, dang, did they say 50%? Nah, let me
Let's
not
see. I'm trying
misquote
to
that.
find it.
I think it was near the end ish of the article
They do say
where,
at the end, these external factors might even be influenced by your genes, which could explain the heritage results.
yeah,
But
there
that's
was like a
not a number
percentage
like you
that
were
they
saying.
hypothesized. Yeah.
Let's
But
see. I'm gonna
basically acknowledging that, yeah, genetics potentially could play a role in that. And what was interesting too, though, is that
half,
half, okay, so it was 50%.
which makes sense if you're, I think, looking at VO2 max, because like your
Yeah.
VO2 max is very determined by genetics. Like some people just have higher ones just because they won the lottery. Genetics lottery, not physical live lottery.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of I thought that was a a good talking point to insert into an article like this that was very based on like research and different things like that. So I like the fact that they brought that particular variable in there, because in the work that I'm in, that comes into play a lot, where people are like, well, is it just my genetics? You know, like so and so from like all the women in my family are built this particular way. So I have that working against me and blah, blah, blah. But I think with the VO2 max stuff, I didn't realize how much of an impact that actually played. And they even identified that many times, like within a family group, like pretty much you can identify like, okay, this is probably something that's going
Yeah,
to have a major
probably.
impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. So, all
Yeah.
right. Anything else on this article before we
I'm going to wrap it up with one of their
land the
sentences.
plane? Yeah.
It says, if there is true variability in training response, though, it seems to be trivial compared to other sources of variability. So, like we were saying, measurement error, stress, diet, lifestyle, sleep, genes.
Yep. Exactly. So
That's
there
all I
you
got.
go. All right. Cool. All right. We're both fading. I can tell we're fading. All right.
I
I'm
know.
fading at least. All right. Let's see here. So let's go ahead and wrap things up. So do you want to let folks know
Yeah.
where they can
If you don't
find
already,
us?
follow us on Instagram at Lifting Running Living Pod. Or you can email us at liftingrunningLivingPod@gmail.com. Or we would love it if you would leave a rating and review on Apple. Or we'd love it if you would leave a comment on this specific episode or any specific episode on Spotify, letting us know what you think.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we are going to land the plane. It's pulling back into the hangar. I was going to say pulling into the garage. I think it's called the hangar. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I
definitely
don't
late.
know.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, folks, for listening. Definitely appreciate it. As Kelly said, if you've got feedback, like to throw in your opinion, if you have suggestions for future episodes, we are always
Oh, yeah.
down to listen to your suggestions, like the
We
DJ. Like
will
you can make
take it into
requests.
account.
That's a request. Yeah, because we want to make sure we want to ideally talk about things that you are interested in, and we are not
Yeah.
short of opinions. So we got plenty of those. So with that, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Lifting, Running, and Living. Take care, and we'll catch you next time.
Goodbye.